Well, welcome to everyone who's joined us for this morning's webinar, one of a whole series that the Life Events team have been doing, particularly around death and funerals. This particular webinar has been offered in response to a question we asked in our original funerals webinar, where we asked people if they'd be interested in hearing a little bit more about funerals and technology. So we're delighted this morning to be joined by some other guests as well as myself. Many of you have met me before, but I'm Sandra Millar, heads up the work we do nationally around life events, which of course includes funerals. We'll be joined for a short conversation with Jeremy Brooks from Oxford Diocese, a little bit more about Zoom and technology from Jane Natrass from Newcastle, and a significant part at the end is from Tom Pearson, whose voice you will have recognised as he often hosts our questions for us. But Tom is our technical consultant to the team, and he will be really getting to share some of the practicalities with you as we go through. So welcome to this webinar. During this time, I'll do a little bit to link to what we say more generally about funerals and help us think about the purpose of our funeral ministry, and then talk about what we do, a little bit how we use technology before the funeral happens. And then I'll hand over to Jane Natrass, who will talk about different ways of using technology on the day of the funeral, in particular Zoom. And then I'll briefly say something about bereavement aftercare and where technology fits into that. Then hand over to Tom, who'll do lots of useful and important and practical things. And you hopefully will have lots of questions during this webinar to any of us, but please do type in questions at any time during what any of us are saying. It isn't one of those webinars where you can put your hand up and interrupt because we've got so many people involved, but you can type in questions and we have people fielding and looking at those questions, and we'll try, all of us, to answer as many of those as possible when we get to the end. So that's kind of the scope of our time together this morning. Many of you have heard me talk about this now, but it's always helpful to remind ourselves just what we're talking about at this current situation. Partly it helps us to remember the scope around death and funerals. 2018, Church of England conducted around 127,000, 130,000 funerals, and there were 514 deaths in 2018. And the trajectory generally for deaths in England and indeed in the UK is to go upwards over the next few years. That's an average number of funerals of 1,400 per day. At the moment, what we don't know is that in this crisis, whether that has meant we as the Church of England have taken more or less funerals. We're hearing different stories, and we'd always be interested to hear your story on that. We do know that nationally in April 2020, there was the highest ever number of deaths in England recorded during that month since records began for that particular statistic. But still, as has always been the case, 80% of deaths are in fact in the older age groups of 65 or 70 and over, which is very significant when we think about technology, about who is impacted, about grief and bereavement and involving people. Because as you know, we talk about two kinds of people that we meet when we think about our funeral ministry. And both of these groups are important when we think about how we communicate at this time around funerals. We think about close contacts. That's the people we would normally and still meet with, talk with, plan with, spend time with. And there will be ways of using what we might call traditional technologies, just phone calls to people, emails to people, being in touch with them. We may be using Skype meetings or other meetings to get groups of families together to help talk and plan and think through exactly what we're able to offer at this time. But a really important group when we start thinking about technology and funerals for us is going to be what we call wide contacts. I think it's only just sinking into people how many people we would normally be meeting at this time, just simply attending funerals. We calculate as a Church of England that every year we meet approximately 7 million people just attending funerals, whether in a church or a crematoria or at a graveside at a cemetery or woodland burial ground. These are the people who come to funerals because they may not be close, but they feel connected to that person and their story. How do we help those people now at this time to experience funerals, to have some awareness of the church's ministry at that time, and to build good memories of what has happened? Particularly, as I mentioned, a lot of people, 80% dying in their older years, in the fullness of years. Many of those people will have grandchildren, even great-grandchildren, who are encountering funerals, death and grief for the first time. And many of them are in a generation for whom using technology will be totally normal. So enabling them to access funerals through technology could be really important and helpful. It's also useful to keep reminding ourselves of what it is this funeral's for, what we might be doing with technology, what we might not be doing. All of these things are from our research with people as to what they think happens at a funeral. It's clear that at a funeral, one of the main tasks that will happen is somehow disposing of a body. That will be either through cremation or through burial, and that has to happen at a funeral. But then all these other things are the kind of things that are going on with the words that we say and use and the liturgies and so on that we offer. There is a way in which people say their last social goodbye, their last farewell to someone. Those who are present feel able to do that, to mark that occasion. And we know that for many people, that being present at the funeral is a significant stage in the grieving process. So how does that work for people who can't actually go to a graveside, to a crematoria at this time, that sense of letting go, of saying goodbye to someone? We know that in recent years, there's been a huge trend to move a funeral away from being a time of sadness, lots of bright clothes, balloons, colours and so on. And people saying, it's really important at this time that we celebrate and we give thanks for life. And that's a really interesting thing about how's that been impacted and how important is it to people and how does it fit in with the way we can offer funeral ministry at this time? In a world where we can no longer offer a physical hug or even a handshake, a hand on an arm, a pat on the back, none of that can happen. How is it in our funeral ministry that we are offering comfort to the bereaved? Those few that will be able to be physically present at a graveside, but also that wider group who can't be there. We give hope for the future and we offer that opportunity to think a bit about life after death. And perhaps some of those have come into sharper focus for people. And of course, we're offering a Christian funeral, which means there's some other things that we're doing as well. We are always commending a person to the loving mercy of God, and that will still be happening. But how do we reflect on the gospel, both for those who are present and those who are not present? And of course, that important part of a funeral, which may be very much in view for people at the moment, that awareness of our own mortality and how we live going forward. How are we doing that differently? What is happening differently? And is technology a help? Or perhaps it's not for others. So I'm going to hand over to Jeremy Brooks, who is the rector of Beaconsfield. And just Jeremy's going to give a short reflection on what he's been experiencing about funeral ministry at this time. So Jeremy, over to you.
Hi, thanks very much, Sandra. Yes, I mean, I suppose my experience as just as a parish priest in Beaconsfield and having conducted quite a few funerals since the lockdown began, is that when I talk with families about how technology could help us, I'm interested how many people seem slightly anxious about that and don't necessarily want to use technology. So my purpose in this webinar, is really just to provide a reassurance to say, if you're feeling the whole world of technology is new and strange, please don't worry about it. Sandra says that a lot of the people for whom who are bereaved aren't necessarily in the category of people for whom technology is at ease. I suspect that's probably true for quite a lot of us who are actually taking the services as well, that technology is something that we're having to learn a lot about very, very fast. And what I've discovered, I think, is that when people don't have that technology, actually the funeral itself can take on a different dimension. And maybe it can when technology is present as well. But because the numbers in the crematorium or the cemetery chapel are very small, there is a much greater intimacy about these funerals. And what I think is that grief, when Sandra was talking about the purposes of a funeral, that purpose of grief really comes right out to the fore. And so I have found these services to be incredibly intimate, and the awareness of grief is very present, but then the awareness of love is similarly present. And close family don't feel the need to be strong, as it were, and to get through the funeral without shedding a tear, and to focus so much on celebration and thanksgiving that they can't grieve. And I think we've just rediscovered a sense of grief. I said in a piece a couple of weeks ago that perhaps it's been one of the gifts of the coronavirus season, that we have learnt to mourn once more. And whether that's affected by technology or not, I don't know. And I'm really interested to listening to Jane and her experience of how she's used technology really well. But mine is just a caveat at the beginning of the webinar to say that don't be too anxious that technology is going to solve all your problems. And even if you can't manage the technology, I think some of the funerals that I've done at the moment have been amongst the most moving that I've done in my 23 years of ministry. And we can find a way to use this season to bring great blessing and to bring the comfort of God and to bring the love of God to people's lives at a time when they really need it, with or without technology. So that's my piece, really. But so back now to Sandra for the rest of the thing, and to show how we can all use technology much, much better than we are at the moment, and how it itself can be a gift. So back to you, Sandra. Just
to talk a little bit more, I think it's really helpful to remind us that the technology is a tool to serve us, and it's rather than just being the only thing that we need to do. So right now, just for a moment, think about how we use the technologies, and old and new, before the funeral, the tasks that we have of making contact with people. And some of that contact might just be made through what I might call old-fashioned ways, like emailing people or just a phone call. But building and beginning that relationship with people is really important, and showing care to them before the funeral, keeping in touch. Before this crisis, we often said to people about how you might just simply send a text on the day of the funeral to say that you were praying for people. That might be even more important right now. And making sure that people are aware of all the different ways we can communicate with them before the family, that they know about the resources on the Church of England website, they know about lighting a candle online, they know about a reflection to use at the day at home. And it isn't just families who need to know what we're going to be doing. It's really important that funeral directors know what we're doing as well, that these are the things that we can offer to families at this time. Also, we're going to think a bit now with Jane about what happens on the day of the funeral, and as Jeremy mentioned, how the social media, how technology might help us on that day and help that wider group of people to engage with the service. There are lots of different ways we might use. We might be talking about recording in some way to be shared later, and that's really standard practice at a lot of crematoria now. We might be talking about live streaming or virtual gatherings, but of course we might also just simply be using those online resources that exist. So I'm going to hand over to Jane Natrass in Newcastle, who's really been developing lots of interesting ways of using virtual gatherings and different ways of engaging all of those who want to be engaged on the day of the funeral. So it's over to you, Jane.
Good morning, it's good to be with you all. I'm going to share my screen so that you can work your way through the Death by PowerPoint slides, but I hope that it might be useful for you. So I think the first thing to say is to agree with Jeremy really that we need to recognise that some and perhaps all of the options that are not accessible to all officiants shouldn't make us worry about things. It should never leave anybody feeling inadequate if they can't offer some or all of the options. But on the other hand, there are people like Tom and people across this country and elsewhere who can do all the work in the background for us should we wish to do that. I found myself engaging with technology really because the words rung in my head: clothe yourselves with compassion, kindness, gentleness and patience. We all saw on the news, and we read in newspapers and everywhere else, how difficult it has been for families, particularly with the coronavirus, but also for people who are dying without coronavirus, and how difficult funerals are. So I began to wonder, who might we serve? And of course we serve the bereaved in our funeral ministry, and I found that they were a bit lost, not quite knowing what to do. Usually they'd have expected a funeral perhaps with just a few people, or perhaps with hundreds of people, and how they have to negotiate a new set of circumstances. The work of the funeral directors has increased massively, and if you speak to funeral directors, you'll understand some of the stresses and strains that they're working under. They too have had to find different ways of working, and they're having to deal with a huge volume of work too. And the final set of people for me were the crematoria and the cemetery staff. We have two chapels at the Crem in Newcastle, and they've opened up now on a Saturday, and every 15 minutes there's a funeral going into the Crem. It's quite something for the staff there and for the cleaners and so on that have to work. So it all starts with the visit at a distance, just as Sandra said, the various ways that we find to have the funeral visit. I think the very old-fashioned way was to actually go and knock on somebody's door and have that visit, but at the moment it's impossible. So the options of using telephone, FaceTime, WhatsApp, Skype, Zoom, Messenger, and the list seems to be endless at the moment, to find ways where we feel comfortable with engaging with families, however we do that. And I think it's been really interesting that families have said, can you phone Auntie Sylvia or Sister Christine or Brother Roland or whoever it is, so that people across the country can feel involved in preparing for a funeral service, not just preparing for the funeral, but other things that they might want. So I asked, how can we help? These conversations are very sensitive because it's not about pushing people into doing something that they don't want to do, but it's actually about giving them the options. So how can we help? Is it a creme funeral or is it at the graveside? There are many resources, and I'm very grateful to the Life Events team, the Church Hub support and everything else that happens. There are lots of things that we can order free of charge, or we can print ourselves and use them with the families. We consider with the families whether or not they need to use the post or email, because not everyone has technology. And I also discuss with them whether or not they'd like to use the internet as a means of having a funeral. And for me at the moment, that means a funeral using Zoom and telephone, so that the ones without any tech and no Zoom can join in by telephone. We can speak to them and they can speak to us. So why hold a funeral using Zoom? Family and friends can gather together wherever they live. We've had people join us from California, from Cambridge, all over the place, and they can gather exactly where they are. They tend to come as they are, they don't dress up, they just join with family and friends for a funeral. And sometimes people from our own congregations join in with that funeral as support for the family. Some people are not able to be present at a funeral physically and couldn't be in normal circumstances. And that's for many reasons, not just because they're shielding or because they're isolating, but because perhaps they're housebound or their work has taken them away, all kinds of reasons. And by using Zoom, they can be present at the funeral wherever they are. There are no limits on numbers, depending, of course, on the license for your Zoom. Our diocese has been really good. So I'm an area dean, and the diocese has kindly shared the license with us, so we could have up to 500 people on our Zoom. Sometimes the funerals are only for half a dozen people on Zoom, and sometimes the numbers are greater. There's no travel involved in all of this, except for the very close family who go to the creme. And the creme here allows up to 20 people to attend a service. And if I had to go a little bit further to Whitley Bay, it would only be 10 people. But the travel is kept to a minimum. I do the funeral over Zoom about 2 hours before the creme, because one of the important things I've found is to leave the meeting open for conversation after the service. It's very different for family and friends and congregation members gathering together over Zoom, because of course they see what the vicar or the funeral officiant usually sees, the faces of people. We can see distress and pain, we can see laughter, we can see people, particularly in households, supporting one another, particularly during a eulogy where somebody might break down and cry, there's an arm stretched out for somebody, and you can see people praying for them and urging them on, sharing their grief and their pain. But it is very different to a funeral service in a church or a creme, where people in the congregation tend just to see the backs of people's heads. Those conversations after the service, I just leave them to it. I go off and have a cup of coffee or something. But it is amazing to see the difference from when they first come onto Zoom, full of pain and anguish and sorrow. And then I hope they hear the Christian hope, and you can see them changing. And the conversations at the end of the service are usually about the deceased and them sharing stories. So the funerals that I do using Zoom, I use the full Church of England service right up until the committal, which I do at the crematorium, or if it's a graveside service, then there tends to be a bit more content at the graveside. I'm not quite sure why that is and why it feels as if we're all present and around and focusing on the burial of the body. During the service, many people can contribute. The family will decide who wants to do a reading, piece of poetry. Somebody might do the Bible reading. There can be more than one tribute, and we take our time, something we can't do at the Crems because of the pressure on time for the Crem staff and the funeral directors. I usually do the Bible reading, the address and the prayers, but families can do that if they so wish, except I would always give the address so that the message of Christian hope of eternal life is there for people. You can use videos of music, so when people are gathering for the service, the family may have put together a whole series of PowerPoints or send me photographs, and I set them to music as a way of gathering everybody at the service. The funeral directors are really helpful, and they send photographs of the coffin, the nameplate and the flowers. These are things which families would usually want to see when they have a church or a Crem funeral. Often they want to touch, but that can't happen. But they can, of course, go and see the flowers in the garden afterwards, but they miss out on seeing the nameplate. So those pictures have become really an important part of a slideshow, a PowerPoint presentation, which I set to music so that they can all see that. And I'm very fortunate that we've been having our Sunday services and other services over Zoom. And so one of my church wardens is in the background helping me. My mobile phone is left open so that we can message each other. So if my sound goes off or if I've frozen or whatever happens, I've got some backup with the Zoom Verger, which is my church warden. I have to say, when we started doing these, the pair of us were so full of adrenaline. It was kind of a, run around the garden afterwards to try to get rid of it all. But we've become more confident as the weeks have gone on. So the question is, am I techie? Well, no, not really. I've learned how to do 4 things well, I hope anyway. I have learned how to use PowerPoint and soundtrack videos. So I tend to tip it all into a video editor because it seems much more slicker. We don't have to show our screens and start the PowerPoint because a video will start straight away. So I've learned how to do all of that. I have learned how to set up Zoom meetings and invite people to them. And it's important to follow safeguarding protocols and security protocols. And your diocese should have those protocols of advice on how to do all of that. And please ask them if you need it. I've also learned to talk others through the steps of joining a Zoom meeting, a church service of any kind. And I'm finding I'm having to do that less and less now, because so many people have taught themselves or had friends and families to teach them how to do all of that. So it's something I had to do a lot of at the start, but now I don't have to do it. And families teach themselves how to work their way through all of this. And of course, I also learned how to share my screen using sound and using pictures and everything else. So all I had to do was those 4 things and learn how to do them well. I think I would say that the Christian message in the using technology, we have lots of opportunities to convey the Christian message, not just at the funeral over Zoom, but using the technology beforehand. So whether I'm emailing, telephoning, Skyping, Zooming, or whatever I'm doing, I always ask at the end, is it all right if I say a prayer with you? And that is always accepted without exception. It's very moving. I tell them that they've had a holy moment if they burst into tears, but it seems to be a very good thing for everybody. I think I want to end by saying that the families are very forgiving when we do all of this. They're not expecting an expert. They know it's me, the vicar, trying to do all of this for them, and they really appreciate it. There was one funeral service where my front door bell went in the middle of the service and somebody was hammering on my door and they were not going to go away. So during the hymn, I went off to answer my front door, and I texted my church warden to tell her that that's what I was doing. Only when I came back, I realised that I had messaged the family, because the family had messaged me to say that they were really struggling and could I help them with the tributes. And their response was to laugh on the screens in front of everybody, and we told the story at the end of the service. So when things do go awry, it really is okay. They are not expecting a BBC production or a BAFTA award-winning production with all of this. As I said at the beginning, technology is not for everybody, but the idea that we can gather people, they can talk about the deceased, that we can facilitate all of that for them and allow people to tell the stories and ask where God is in all of that, a God who loves us all. I'm going to hand back to Sandra now.
Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. That was really very, very interesting. And one can begin to think about how, both hearing from Jeremy and hearing from Jane, how we can use technology and how also we can use some of the more things that may not feel technological, but actually have been enabled through technology. So also we have the resources that can be used on the day of funeral at home. The reflection, which has been extremely important for many, many people, that people can do either on the day of the funeral or nearby. The light a candle function that is on the website, the national website, that people can use to be saying their prayer, their thoughts for that person. The simple prayer card that you could send to a family, a prayer that they could say on that day. And all of this is about them making memories that are really important of the day of the funeral, which is part of the whole process of grieving. And of course, you can begin to talk to people about the possibility, if it feels still necessary, of some kind of next step with them, of some kind of service of thanksgiving and remembering. And that leads us into going forward after the funeral and how, again, the technology is helping us to be relational, to build contact. It is so important at this time, because this is one of the things we can do as a parish church, as a church grounded and rooted in a community, is to have that contact with people, to be intentional about how we keep in touch with them, to have listened to the story and to know the dates and times that are going to be important to them as the year and years unfold as we go forward from this day. The anniversaries and birthdays where a card or a thoughtful prayer might really make an impact. All of that can be enabled through technology as well, as Tom will talk about with tools like the Life Events Diary. And that intentionality means that we're invitational. That may be inviting people as time goes forward to something else using Zoom, where we're keeping in touch and helping them to pray and remember. Or when the time is right and circumstances allow, it might be that moment when you invite people to be able to come back into a physical space to pray privately, or one day we will meet again in public worship, we hope and pray. And all of this is everyone's ministry. It's important at this time that we remember that. It's not all about us, those who are licensed and ordained. It's everyone in our communities and congregations. So enabling other people to feel part of funeral ministry and bereavement care is really important. Using this time to enhance some of the skills online, perhaps doing a bereavement awareness course which is available, or thinking about how we use the technology, as Jane said, learning how to do those things well, discovering those new tools that we didn't know about, and planning the next steps for us as a church in our bereavement ministry. Because as we know, it isn't just now that people are dying. Sometimes the statistics and the presentation of them every day can make it seem as if people just started dying when COVID appeared. But people were dying before that and will continue to die into the future. So many of the things we're learning to do now will enable us to have an effective bereavement and funeral ministry into our communities long into the future. Tell people that we do this, and again, using technology to do that. Make sure families know, as each person has said, just what it is we can do and offer. Not just the families we meet, but the wider families in our communities as well. It's so important to know, to let funeral directors know how we're thinking and what we offer and how we're there for people. And perhaps making sure that the local community, even the wider public, know. Make sure your web page has got information about bereavement and funerals on it. Use local media where you can. Perhaps do something on a community website. Perhaps even get involved with local radio and other communication. Using the technology both to be in touch with families and in touch with the community is really important. So I'm going to hand over now to Tom Pearson. He'll say a little bit about the practicalities, and then really we can give much of the time to the kind of questions that you might be asking of any of us. Over to you, Tom.
What I want to cover this morning will be the responsibility. Whose responsibility is it to be dealing with the technology? I want to cover something called DCS, which is a demand control schema. I want to look a little bit at live streaming, cover some stuff around music and messages at the graveside, look at some other options that we might have available to us, and then we'll have some time for some questions. So, whose responsibility? You know, this is one of the most interesting things about all of these conversations, is that it doesn't always have to be your responsibility to be covering the technological side of what you are doing. We are each called to do what we have been gifted to do. And there are skills that we can learn and that can enhance what we therefore do. But sometimes it's a good idea to delegate, to find someone who's been gifted with a particular set of skills to help out. So my answer in whose responsibility is it to run the technology, make sure the laptop's working, make sure that you've got all the different videos ready, lined up to go, that you've brought along the correct speaker, that it's working and hooked up to the iPhone. It's probably not yours, or at least it doesn't have to be yours. Well-being comes into all of this. One of the things that we are finding is just how intense this period of time is for everybody. We're living through a situation that none of us have ever experienced before. And it's so easy, therefore, to try and take on everything ourselves. As a freelancer myself, this has been a real education in turning down work, because there is family commitments, time pressures like I've never experienced before, reactive and time critical tasks and assignments like I've never seen before. That means that we can use judgment now in a way that allows us to do only what we can and need to do. So whose responsibility is it to make sure that the family that can't come to the funeral can access the funeral in whatever way that might be? Well, it might be the family. It's often okay to be holding the situation, to be holding the grief, to be holding the service, but allow the family to make the relationship and the connection to their family, those that can't attend. I want to talk about something called DCS. DCS is something that you might not have come across. It stands for Demand Control Schema. I came across it because I work in the realms of sign language interpreting as well as in my technological roles. Demand Control Schema allows you to create controls for demands that you will encounter. And in best practice, you have already thought about those demands and have those controls. The three demands that are particularly poignant in the work that you will be doing will be the interpersonal, the intrapersonal, and the environmental. Interpersonal are the folks that are around you, virtually, in person, in the role of a colleague or a member of a family. intrapersonal, that's what's going on inside your own head. Are you coping with grief? Has something triggered something for you while you are trying to hold the service for others? Are you hungry? Is it cold? Are there things inside your head that you're thinking about? And the environmental. Again, is the environment causing you to have further demands, further things that take away from what you're doing? So this is where we can think really clearly about what do we expect when we are about to deliver a funeral, to do a memorial service afterwards, set up a particular Facebook group or be involved with one. What do we expect to happen? And how can we put measures in place to help that go as smoothly as possible? In essence, it's your plan B, your plan C, your plan D, your plan E for all the different demands you can think of. Preparation is key in all of this. Making sure that you've got connectivity if you've chosen to go live with something, and having a plan B if it goes wrong. Right now, I'm sat in in a room with a number of screens in front of me. I've got to the left of me an iPad in which I am an attendee in this very webinar. So I'm seeing what you're seeing. I'm checking in. I'm seeing that things are appearing as I expect them to. I can see your questions. They're coming up on my screen. And I can also see a chat with the other panelists. There's a team in the background at the moment, Kathy and Ruth. Hello, both of you. They are doing sterling work, reading your questions, adding them onto a shared Google document, which is on another screen of mine. They've got a phone call between them at the moment, so that if everything goes wrong, they can still talk to each other. We have open text chats ready. What this means is we have slowly put in place factors that will mitigate problems that we might encounter. I'm going to recommend a book, which is something I very rarely do. I'm always recommending websites. I'm going to recommend this book that's on the screen. And it's for interpreters and about sign language interpreter. And that may be a little jarring initially. But read the book from your own perspective. What interpersonal demands are you experiencing in the assignments you're taking on? I use that term because we use it in interpreting all the time. It's an assignment. You have accepted an assignment. You feel that you are best placed to deliver what is required. You are safe to practice. So you go and do it. You prepare. You think about who's going to be there. You make sure that you have eaten enough, that you're not going to feel too cold, that you've layered, that in this heat you have enough water. And you think about the environmental factors. What in the environment could go wrong? Is a router going to suddenly stop working? Is 3G going to be an issue? Is Facebook going to suddenly go down? How can you mitigate any of those? And if you can't mitigate them, how can you have a plan B? These are the biggest things I think come into technology and the way that we run technology smoothly. We think about the situation before we just walk into it, and we have backup plans. Let's talk live streaming because it is all the rage at the moment. Go live. Give it a try. If you've got a mobile phone and you have the Facebook app or the YouTube app or the Instagram app, you'll have a little go live button. It will say go live or similar. As we know, these apps change their layout quite regularly. And Facebook, I think it's currently top left. Press it. Go live to your friends. have a nice background, maybe a garden, or when you're on your government mandated constitutional walk, try going live. See what goes right, see what goes wrong, see how you handle comments, get a feel for it. I think there is no better practical tip than for me to say, test and try. We've been doing webinars for between 300 and 900 people over the last couple of weeks. And I've sat in this very home office in a shielding household on the outskirts of the town of Belper, and I've run these webinars from a technical point of view. And each time we've had a pre-meeting, we've talked about it. We've talked about what has gone right previously, where we've had hiccups and those sorts of things. That helps us plan for the next ones. In the bottom right-hand corner of all my slides is a URL. That URL takes you to a place where I have added links to the things that I'm talking about, and the other speakers today, as they have mentioned things, the team in the background have been making note of that, and they'll be adding them as well. Slide decks may well also be available there for you. Try going live. Using a content mixer. Lots of you have already been asking questions about this, and I want to cover this just a little bit. You've got that go live button, and that sends your device live straight out to Facebook or YouTube. Great, lovely. Someone's asked, what's a slide deck? It's PowerPoint slides or keynote slides, something like that. Slide deck, it's your presentation slides. A little bit of jargon there for you, slide deck. A content mixer allows you to decide what people are going to see. So you can have guest presenters from multiple places to say a reading, to say a prayer. You can share your screen, PowerPoint. We're doing something similar. We're doing it into Zoom at the moment. You can show photos and pre-recorded video. You can put message on screen and show comments from viewers with one click. BeLive and StreamYard are two of the best known and most accessible in the price point there. I do some stuff on a Sunday morning for a vineyard church, and we have 3 households providing live feeds into BeLive, and then we decide who's going to go on screen. We also put the words on screen. We just use PowerPoint for that, and we share a PowerPoint screen. And then we little click as people make comments, and we can put their comments on screen. There we go. That's my 2-year-old sat on my lap as we are engineering a Sunday morning service. Okay, so there's multiple screens. Doesn't have to be, just happens to be. You can see here, we've got a little breakdown. This is what the viewer will see. And just here at the bottom, we've got what we select to go onto screen. So let me show you a little close-up of that. Here's what it looks like. I've got the sign language interpreter just here. I can hide that person or add them back in. Here we have the PowerPoint, and at the moment it's showing a slide which is just a holding slide. But as soon as I move on, I will see the words to the next song that are coming up. We've got a presenter who's waiting backstage to come on live. Sorry, we've got a presenter here that's live. We've got 2 presenters here that are live, and we've got someone else here that I can show in stream. And all I do is show in stream, and I can just hide and show in stream, etc. Just to make it clear, that bottom zoom in bar is from a different Sunday service than the one that you can see at the top there. I just wanted to show you what it looks like with multiple screens. So all I have to do is just click hide or show in stream, and I can add them in and out of the mix. I can then push this out to YouTube or to Facebook. And here's where it's really great. I can put it to an individual profile. I can put it to an individual group or an individual page. What this means is that your family could set up, or the family who are bereaved could set up a group, invite folks into that group who they would like to access this service that you might be putting on, maybe a memorial service, maybe you are live streaming the actual thing itself, and then you live stream just to that group. So Sarah, thanks very much for your question there. The answer is the examples I just showed were from Be Live. There it is, b.live is the website address. There is another alternative, which is StreamYard. You can find all of these links available to you at churchsupporthub.org/funeral tech. I've linked to them there. And what I've also done is linked to a Sunday morning service for you to actually watch. Live streaming, no, I haven't mentioned Zoom. Yes, you can go out from Zoom. There are lots of ways of live streaming from Zoom. It gives you a lot less control than those two options that I've just mentioned there. Music licenses, this has come up in the questions throughout today, and it comes up in every single live streaming and pre-recorded questions we have. CCLI are your friends. Send them an email, give them a call. This is so important. Don't just ask friends and colleagues. Don't just ask the hive mind of your Facebook. Ask CCLI. Tell them what you want to do and check that you are licensed correctly. Don't expect that in every single webinar in which live streaming is mentioned, someone is going to tell you what licenses you need, because it is so bespoke to the individual situation. Speak to CCLI. Say, we're going to do a live stream of a memorial service. We'd like to use some pre-recorded music, which we want to use from a recording from our church from a few years back that we have, and we're putting it into a private group, which is invitation only, and then have a chat with them. Someone said CCLI has told them that they need an expensive PRS license. Here's the important thing. It honors the artists and publishers who create the music. As Christians, we should be doing the right thing. We should be correctly licensing. It is the right thing to do. CCLI will help you. CCLI, talk it through with them, exactly what you want to do, exactly who the audience is going to be. That will really, really help. Have a chat with them. Music and messages at the graveside. Thank you, Jeremy. Please mention that CCLI doesn't cover quite a lot. One license is needed for a lot, for instance, of hymns old and new. Okay, let's be really clear about this. Speak to CCLI, have a chat with them. They will advise you if you give them clear understanding exactly what the issue is, what you are going to be planning to do, who you need to contact, whether you need to contact PRS, whether you need to contact PPL. Have that dialogue with CCLI. Your account manager there is going to be so useful in directing you. Music and messages at the graveside. Think about a portable battery-powered speaker. Now, you can get a lovely big one like this, about 130 quid, something like that. And you can plug various things into it. Usually you can Bluetooth into these sorts of things as well. You can get a nice little one. That really does have a cross on it. It's lovely, isn't it? That's the plus and minus, but it just looks nice, doesn't it? Again, that's about 100 quid, something like that. Test it. Remember your demand control schema. Don't arrive on the day, hit play on a piece of music that was so important, or a message from a family member that couldn't attend and they've recorded it and nobody can hear it. Go out into an open space. Test your technology. Check things are fully charged. Really important. Screens don't work outside. This is almost unanimous. They just really don't work outside. Doesn't matter if it's an iPad, a projection, etc., etc. The screens that do work are LED screens, and they are very large and very expensive and very specialist technology. And I imagine that the majority of funerals that you will be doing won't be able to afford that sort of technology. So find a different way of doing things, not using the screen outside for multiple people to have to see things. Mentioned about microphones. Have a look for live streaming. I'm using a nice little condenser mic here. This one is only about 80 quid or so. Comes with a nice little arm. It's very nice. My voice probably sounds pretty acceptable over live streaming. Have a little look on Amazon for some good deals, or your other retailers are available, obviously. Take a look on YouTube, get some reviews there. Don't forget about email, text messages, a church near you, and your church website. Keep them up to date. Make sure that you're engaging with people appropriately and in the right methods. Remember that we've got Light a Candle, both for funerals and a more generic online Light a Candle. Again, churchsupporthub.org/funeral tech. I've put the links there ready for you. Life Events Diary, for keeping in touch with people, using technology to engage, build relationship. Come along to one of my webinars about the Life Events Diary. Find out how it is going to help your funeral ministry, as well as weddings and baptisms, with the big caveat of we know no more than you about if and when things will be changing. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to open it up for questions now, and they are on one of my screens just here. So, Jane, Sandra, we've got some questions that have been coming in. A huge number of questions, as always, and Kathy and Ruth doing an amazing job in the background here. Jane, I've got a really practical one for you here. Where do you sit or stand, and what do you wear for a Zoom funeral?
So I sit in this room here. You'll notice that there is a wall behind me. I've taken the clocks and things down so it's not a distraction. Sometimes I'll put a cross up behind me. Sometimes I forget about it in all the angst of getting everything ready. I wear what I wear, usually a dog collar, clerical shirt. And interestingly, the families also come as they are. And then they change when they go into the creme into suit and black tie. So I'm in my robes at the creme.
Lovely, lovely. That's really useful to understand. We've got a question here about what video editor programs there are. DaVinci Resolve is free. It's from Blackmagic. Let's excuse them, the brand name there. So that's an excellent industry standard, fantastic piece of editing kit, and it's free. There's also iMovie for those of you that are using Macs and iOS. Jane, do you have any preferences on video editing software?
Yeah, I tend to use PowerPoint and insert the audio into that and then turn it into a video direct from PowerPoint.
Lovely idea, lovely idea. So yeah, just adding all and then exporting as or saving as a video. Lovely idea, fantastic. So how can I use Zoom or a live stream from a graveyard or a crematorium where there isn't any Wi-Fi? Good question, that one. This is your demand control schema. Again, this is your preparation. Go to the venue that you're going to probably use many times over the next few weeks and months. Try tethering to a mobile phone if your package allows it. If not, get in touch with your mobile provider and ask for tethering. What that means is that your mobile phone becomes the Wi-Fi hotspot for your laptop. The caveat still applies, which is that screens are rubbish outside. Jane, have you got any experience of using laptops and screens outside, or have you you wisely avoided it, or have you found a really good route around it?
Yeah, my kit doesn't work very well on 4G, even though it can do, and I wouldn't take that risk at a creme or a graveside. But families who come with smartphones, particularly iPhones, who can FaceTime, do all the recording themselves. Yeah. We've gone beyond telling people in congregations to switch their cameras off, switch your phones off. So I speak to the family beforehand, and we work out which person can do all of that for them, and then they like to have a backup as well, so we don't have to do it.
Can I add something there, Tom? I think another thing to say is most crematorium now, in fact, will have their own recording going on, and they will then send to the family a link so they can get a recording of what's happening. Many of them are doing that anyway, so that's helpful to know. But also one of the things we're just putting together, which should be available probably next week, the week after, a downloadable funeral planning sheet, as it were, that we can work with families now who not someone who's already died, but any of us could do this. And now we've actually inserted, Jane, the question, are you comfortable with having the service recorded? We just put it in because I think it's really important now that it's normal, and we should stop worrying too much about whether it's odd. And I think, as Tom said, whose responsibility is it? Sometimes it's just up to the family to do these things rather than us thinking we have to do every little part of it. Actually, if they want it recorded and they're happy to do it, they do it on their own phone. And they've often got more skills and equipment than we have anyway as well.
Some folks have been understandably raising usual questions around avoiding safeguarding issues. So, how can we mitigate risk? My absolute recommendation is speak to your diocesan safeguarding team. Do the panel have anything else to say on any of this? No. Yeah, I think we're in agreement that when it comes to things like safeguarding, speak to your diocesan safeguarding team, have that conversation with them. What's the minimum broadband recommended, Jane? Have you experienced the any of this at all?
Yeah, so I just take what I'm given. There's not a lot you can do about it, really. And just very occasionally on a Sunday morning, we'll have over 100 people in the service, and suddenly I'll get a message that says your internet is unstable, and I look at it and think, the internet is unstable? What is it doing to me? But it's about being calm, and it will come back. It's a few seconds seems like a long time, but we've never ever had to stop the meeting and start again.
And I think that's the thing, is that you'll find different minimum specs all across the internet. Again, you just need to pop it into your favorite search engine, and very quickly you will get those details. Test. Over to Sandra.
Well, I was just going to add, I find this greatly consoling that quite early on in this, I was watching Saturday Kitchen Live with the BBC, and they had two guests on screens, so there's a whole BBC is there. And all of a sudden, they lost both of them completely. And they didn't lose them for 2 minutes. They didn't lose them for 5. They lost them for 30 minutes. And I was greatly consoled by this, because I thought, if the BBC, with all of their specialist and skilled knowledge, can actually sometimes mess up the technology, it's okay. And I think we're seeing that a lot, even with the news and so on. They bring people in, sometimes they freeze, they go all pixelated, because everybody's now getting used to the fact that sometimes the broadband width doesn't sustain things, or something will happen locally. And I think Jane said this as well, just be calm through it. And that's kind of what you were saying, know that it might happen, just stay calm when it does happen.
Stay calm and walk through it. Be prepared for it. How will you handle it if these certain things go down? One of the great things about BeLive, StreamYard, Zoom, etc., is for the broadcast to continue, it is not reliant on one single fail point. So if my computer goes down now and my broadband cuts out, Jane and Sandra will continue on this webinar. And that will be absolutely fine. It will carry on. And I pre-make people co-hosts so that they can take over my role. On StreamYard, we can, on BeLive, we can just refresh the page if we need to. The service continues. Can we use BeLive with Zoom meetings? Good question, Richard. I'd want to know a little bit more about what you mean by that. You cannot go from BeLive into a Zoom meeting directly, but what you could do is do BeLive to somewhere, a private Facebook group, full screen that, and then screen share that in Zoom. It's a interesting way around it, but I'd love to know more about your thinking there. Loads of questions about licensing and music. There always is. They're still coming in. Royalty-free music, a little bit of a funny one, this. So first of all, the Resource Hub on the Church of England's A Church Near You has got some music that you can use if you have the correct licensings from CCLI, so do take a look at that. But oh, hello, Jeremy has joined us again. That's very kind. Hello, Jeremy.
Just what you were saying about technology giving out on us sometimes.
No worries. Hello, Jeremy. I have a question for you here, actually. I'll come to you in just a minute. Lovely to see you. We'll be with you in just one moment. Have a look at some companies such as Soundstripe. Again, I'll pop it over on Church Support Hub /funeral tech, where you buy a license to use any of their catalogue of music without any additional licensing required. So if you're making a lot of videos and using a lot of additional audio, do have a look at that. Now, that's not going to be your hymns and those sorts of things. That's for when you're making your own videos. Lots of people talking about photos with music and needing good backing music. Take a look at those sorts of things. Just come across one question there about vMix and OBS. For those that understand what vMix and OBS are, thank you, Sarah Jane. Great question. We've chosen not to use it purely for the reason that there becomes one single fail point, which is your own computer and your own broadband. What OBS does, it lets you have all your different feeds coming in and you get to share everything, but they're all reliant on your computer. And I can tell you that last Sunday, we had an issue where our broadband went down here. The Sunday service was able to continue. Loads of people had issues last Sunday. Loads of things went wrong across the globe, technological-wise. But it meant that we could continue. So that's the reason I've chosen not to use it. Loads of churches are. Do jump onto the Church Tech Facebook groups that are around. Jeremy, a question for you. Do you have hymns at your funeral services now? There's a whole thing about not singing at the moment, isn't there?
There is, and that's just all. So I think a lot of that's come out in the last sort of couple of weeks. So I have, to be honest, always asked the family if they want hymns. And when you've got a service just at the crematorium, for me, it's felt important to be able to say to the service, to say to people, you don't have to feel this is a kind of beta service. You know, you can do as much as you would have done with other people. So people have wanted to sing hymns. I mean, people have wanted to give tributes, and it's felt a bit strange when someone stood up and given a tribute to someone and you think everybody in the room knows all about this person already. But it's, you know, it's part of what people have wanted to do. So yeah, I mean, we have sung hymns. The advice is getting more and more about not singing hymns. And I've kind of put it in the ball of the crematorium court at the moment, saying, if you really feel that we shouldn't be singing hymns at the crematorium, you should be saying so. But I think it is problematic, the whole hymn singing, because of coronavirus. Sorry, Sandra.
Yeah, I'll just say, I think one of the problems we're running into a little bit is the Church of England guidance that will be there, and sometimes the crems are doing slightly different things, you know, about numbers, about hymns, about music and so on. The Church of England guidance will remain clear that we shouldn't be singing hymns, and that I think will continue to be said over the next few weeks. Certainly I've been in meetings talking about hymn singing, and I know there are meetings going on all the time about that, but it gets difficult when we've got to work on that local situation as well. So it's finding a way through that, and I think we'd say encourage people to listen to recordings of hymns as well, where we can. You know, we've got lots of lovely recordings that can be used and played, you know, on CD, the Crem and so on. So think about that as well. But you're right, people like the words, and apparently it's okay to do choral speaking, as it were, so to have everyone read together the words of Psalm 23 is okay, but not to sing the Lord's my shepherd. So there we go, we're all learning new ways of being and doing, aren't we, at the moment, and finding our way through that, those different guidances that come. And crems are not consistent either, because I think a lot of people think all crematoria are run by the government in the way, you know, and of course they're not. A lot of them are private, they're owned by different groups, and they're all adjusting their particular advice. So we have to try and negotiate all of that with who we are and what we're being advised as well. So good luck.
Just to add that in Zoom services, people can sing their hearts out, but the tip is to make sure that they mute their microphone.
Yes.
So again, on that, there is some excellent resources available about how to set up Zoom meetings. Again, remember, meetings is where you are all participants rather than in this case where you've come as attendees. And some of those things include muting mic on entry, muting, switching off video on entry, those sorts of things that you as the arranger or the person that you've designated to arrange the meeting can put in place beforehand. And that helps mitigate some of those things. I'm noticing the time. We still have an enormous number of people with us still. Jane, Sandra, Jeremy, have you got a few more minutes?
Yeah, a few more minutes before we expire from
Lovely.
Concentration, but yeah.
Had some questions here about some church tech Facebook groups that I'd recommend. Yes, I'm in a couple of really good ones. I will put those onto churchsupporthub.org/funeral tech just after this webinar today. I'll add those in. Well worth being a part of those. A question here for, I think, probably Jane and definitely for Jeremy. Can you share the podium with different people? How do you stay safe if you preside and someone then steps up near you?
You move away.
Yes.
Yeah. So what I do is I will not touch the lectern. I'll keep hold of my books for using as resource, and we have that discussion before we go to the creme, so that those who are giving a tribute or reading know who in their family household is going to be touching the lectern if that's what they're worried about. But I would never touch anything, and of course the button for the curtains is for me to use and no one else.
And we're all still in, of course, always hand sanitizer and washing our hands. We have to keep that in mind as well, and help people to stay appropriately distanced for all the events. And I do think as well that we sometimes forget the good old power of the notice. We're actually used to giving notices quite often at weddings. We often begin, don't we, saying, how lovely to see you here, can I just remind you X, Y, Z. Well, actually, I think sometimes we just need to see it as a notice we give at the beginning of something. Let's just remind everybody we're still socially distancing, so if you need to, just take a step. It's like a children's playground game. Just take a step away from each other right now and just do it in a natural way. That's because we're going to have to get used to this. This isn't suddenly going to end in a week or two. It's going to have to become normal. So a normal kind of notice is to remind people of the distancing and any other things like not touching and so on. Jane, do you touch the coffin at the moment? I presume not, because generally we've said no to that.
No, I don't touch it. And I think that's something that's missing. The creme, and the funeral directors, the pallbearers, of course, are touching the coffin, and then it seems very odd that I'm not doing it as well.
It's an interesting one to think about, but it's generally now practice that we don't touch coffins, I think. Yeah. Thank you.
The question here about recommendations for people who only have traditional phones.
Yeah.
There are a number of services out there available now where you can actually have your service delivered via a on-demand telephone system. So basically what happens is you upload your service, your sermon, whatever it might be, to this particular platform, and then you give a particular phone number to those who want to dial in, and they can hear it that way. That is a sort of on-demand thing that is available out there at the moment. And with most of the meeting packages and webinar packages, including today's, you can in fact dial into them. So if you have a traditional phone and maybe somebody that wants to attend the funeral has a traditional handset, a phone in the hall, whatever it may be, but not a computer, a tablet, a smartphone, you can provide that number to them by making contact by whichever is the most appropriate means. And they can actually call in to your service. That's available. Now, Zoom have made it so that that is not always available on their free package. So do be aware, again, it's your demand control schema. You've got to think about what these demands might be coming up. You've also got to think about your preparation. So you've got to remember with your demands that one of your environmental demands will be that not everyone can see what you are doing now they are listening. That's going to be the same with accessibility issues as well. So you need to think that through before you deliver something and says, and here, look on the screen and this, when you are referring to something that perhaps some attendees are not able to see for themselves.
I would add something to that, Tom, that when we're using Zoom services, the people who are on Zoom use their landlines or mobile phones to phone people, and that personal contact means that people can listen in, but they can always speak to us as well, and we make a point at the end of services of speaking and having a conversation to the people on the end of the phone. And the other thing to go alongside it is that I use the reflection at home document, which I personalise, and it gets sent in the post to the people, and the prayers are the same as that we would use in the service, so they have more detail than they would normally have.
And I think I want to be really, really clear that despite its lucky break and prominence, Zoom is not the only platform. WebEx from Cisco is available. You've got things like Blue Jeans. You've got this, Google Hangouts. Facebook have now created something where you can video call in groups. There's FaceTime. There's WhatsApp video calling. Do pick the platform that feels right for you, and or let the family pick the platform that's right for them. We don't just have to go with the fact that in the media we hear about Zoom all the time, because there are so many other options out there that might be more suitable. Most of them have a free trial. Give it a little play.
Just say, Tom, on the reflection at home, I think also we need, I think we've said this all the way through, with also things Jeremy said, that, it's not inferior or inadequate if you end up, a couple of people sat at home with a reflection at home, just reading it together on or near the time of the funeral without any other means going on. That actually is okay. It's not inferior. If that's what works for them in that situation to do that, then that's great and fine. And being able to either email that out so people can print it off, or just popping it in, the printing one off and popping it in the post, so some people can do that as they need to, the comfort of their own, what's right for them is perfectly okay for them to feel included, even though they might not be using technology. So, that's okay as well. And we know that there are situations where actually, an interesting one that came through was to do with, a bit specialist, but to do with prison ministry, where all this technology, none of this can happen. So actually the printed thing became very, very important to people in that situation. So yeah, it's good, whatever works for people and makes them feel part of being able to do those remembering, do those commending and praying things that we want them to be able to do is helpful.
Absolutely. I just want to polish up a couple of things. Some of the things that we've spoken about today include subscription costs. In fact, quite a few of them do. I won't go into each of them, just as Jane hasn't. And indeed, it might not be yourself that's paying for them. So please do go off and have a look at what they would cost, not just for the free trial, but post the free trial if it works out for you. If you're using Facebook Live, does everyone watching need to be a Facebook member? No, I believe that you can send the link for the Facebook Live, particularly if you've scheduled it, and they can watch it just in the browser, which in whatever they're using, Chrome, Internet Explorer, Firefox, whatever. But you get quite forceful prompts from Facebook to log in, I believe. I would say that perhaps in that circumstance, where you think that many people won't be Facebook members but will be using some form of internet connected device, use YouTube. Last question, I think, here for the other members of the panel. As there will be a large demand for memorial services after lockdown, what do you think memorial services will look like? What will they contain? And are there resources likely to be available to support clergy and families?
Shall I just go on that, because I'm been part of a whole conversation. There's a number of things. First of all, I'll question that there definitely will be. That's the first thing. I think we need to be watching what's going on. I mean, I think when people may have had the kind of Zoom funeral Jane has been talking about, maybe that that will be it. You know, they won't need anything else. It also may depend on the length of time there is until we can do things where people gather in person, or we may find that we're needing to create Zoom remembering services. Right now I'm working with a liturgical commission on a whole plethora of guidelines and resources that will come out to help us think about different ways of doing remembering and what we will need to do for those services. And they're on lots of different levels and types of things as well. Creatively, I've just been looking at, for example, an intergenerational remembering service to make sure that we don't forget that a lot of the people that are dying at the moment will have children, will have grandchildren, even great grandchildren, who may now want to access something. So we're thinking creatively about that, and over the next couple of weeks those resources will become available. We also did a webinar on remembering, and the slides from that are up on the Church Support Hub, as these slides will be, and we will probably decide to make the whole recording available as well, so people can hear the messages that we shared at that time. But I don't know if Jeremy or Jane have any other different thoughts on that one.
I mean, I guess from my perspective, that some of the families, particularly where the person who's died as a church member, are very much saying, oh, we'll all come back for the memorial service. Some of the other families are thinking, oh, we can do that. I think I wonder with Sandra whether people actually will. It will feel so different. And let's face it, we're realistically not talking even about the autumn.
No, we're not.
Talking quite a long way ahead.
Yeah.
So by then, people will be at a very different stage of their grief. I suspect a lot of them will think, do you know, I can't face going back to all that now.
Yeah.
We'll see. But no, I mean, in terms of resources, sounds like the Church of England's, that sounds brilliant. I haven't got anything more.
And burial of ashes is the other one we're talking about, that there may be a need to do a more enhanced burial of ashes service. And to keep in touch with the families. That's the other thing we keep saying, just keep in touch with them now. That's why it's never been more important, so that when the time comes and we can meet, you know what it is that will best serve their needs in their journey of grief at that time.
Lovely. I think we're about ready to close, if you are. Would you mind? That would be lovely.
I'll just say a prayer to close our time together. Loving God, we give you thanks for every blessing we have in our lives, and we give you thanks that in this time of crisis we are here now, when we have so many wonderful gifts to use, gifts and resources within ourselves, but gifts that others have developed and created using their imagination and skill. Thank you for the wonder of technologies that serve us and enable us to share your love in new and creative ways. Give us the confidence we need to step out. But above all, give us the wisdom and the heart of compassion we need, so that we can minister to all those we meet in their time of loss. And through whatever medium we use, simply share your love and that great message of hope that in you there is life still to come. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.